The woman who used to scatter thorns in the path of the Prophet, who mocked the Quran, whose arrogance echoed through the streets of Makkah. Today, hear about her end. No washing, no shroud, no funeral. People didn't even go near her. Corpse, her face swollen, eyes red, and her tongue unwilling to be silenced. The Quran declared her accursed, and time proved that no one escapes the justice of God. Umm Jameel bint Harb was a woman from the influential tribe of Banu Umayyah in the Quraysh. Her real name was Arwa, and she was not only the sister of Abu Sufyan, but also the wife of Abu Lahab. In terms of lineage, wealth, and social status, she was one of the most elite women in Makkah. Her family held a central role in the politics of the Quraysh, their leadership, and the administration of the Kaaba. Umm Jameel considered herself among the most honorable and intelligent women of Makkah. She was proud not only of her family's power but also of her own eloquence and cunning. In Makkah, her status was not merely that of a woman. She was seen as an influential and dignified personality whose words carried weight. But this influence, this power, and this pride began to shatter the moment the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, openly proclaimed the oneness of God. What pierced Umm Jameel's heart the most was that an orphan, who had neither wealth nor leadership nor a tribe to boast of, dared to reject the gods of the Quraysh. In her view, Muhammad, peace be upon him, was just a well-mannered man whose words could never challenge Makkah's established system. But when the Prophet, peace be upon him, began openly condemning polytheism, declared idol worship to be false, and invited people to the oneness of God, the pride within Jameel flared up. She realized that if this message spread, the dominance of the Quraysh would come to an end. People would begin to reject the greatness of families like those of Abu Lahab, Abu Sufyan, and her own. That was the moment she decided to oppose this message by every possible means. This hostility was no longer personal jealousy. It had become a battle to protect a system, a power structure, and a social position. And in this battle, Umm Jameel not only became a supporter of Abu Lahab, but rose to become the leader of the women of Quraysh in their enmity against Islam. Umm Jameel's hatred did not remain confined to her heart. She began to express it through her actions. The most prominent of these was her daily practice of scattering thorny branches, sharp bones, and filth on the path leading to the Prophet Muhammad's, peace be upon him, home, intending to injure his feet or cause him distress. This became a routine. Yet the Prophet, peace be upon him, in his unmatched patience never complained. He would simply clear the path and pass by in silence. But to Umm Jameel, this brought a twisted sense of satisfaction, as if she had achieved some kind of victory. It was not merely physical harm, it was the embodiment of the deep-rooted hatred within her that kept her constantly restless. She would gather women for private gatherings, where she spread false stories against the Prophet, peace be upon him, injecting mockery and insult into her words. Her poetry was laced with blasphemy, and her speech carried a venom that poisoned hearts with hatred. Umm Jameel believed she could stop the rise of Islam through her tongue. Her confidence rested on the strength of her tribe, and she believed that the messenger of God, peace be upon him, was alone without power. What she did not realize was that the very tongue she used to curse the Prophet would one day testify against her final humiliation. She did not only attempt to mislead the common people, she also incited the leaders of Quraysh against the Prophet's message. Alongside Abu Jahl, Abu Sufyan, and her husband Abu Lahab, she actively ran an organized campaign of opposition to Islam. She conspired in every possible way to obstruct the message of truth and mock the Prophet, peace be upon him, in the influential social circles of the time. Her hostility was no longer superficial. It had taken root deep within her soul, and that very hatred would soon drag her to the lowest depths of disgrace. The continuous enmity, insults, and conspiracies of Umm Jameel were finally answered by God himself. A chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Tabat, was revealed about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and it became, until the end of time, a declaration of disgrace not only for Abu Lahab but also for Umm Jameel. In this chapter it is stated, "And his wife, the carrier of firewood, around her neck is a rope of twisted palm fiber." God highlighted the very actions this woman committed daily against the messenger of God, peace be upon him, and her fate was sealed in divine revelation forever. When Umm Jameel learned that she had been mentioned in the Quran and that she was referred to as the carrier of firewood, she was consumed with rage. She picked up a stone and ran toward the Kaaba, intending to harm the Prophet, peace be upon him, or at the very least insult him publicly. At that moment, the Prophet, peace be upon him, was seated in the shade of the Kaaba alongside Abu Bakr, may God be pleased with him. Abu Bakr saw Umm Jameel approaching from a distance and became anxious, but the Prophet, peace be upon him, said God has made her blind to us. And so it happened. Umm Jameel stood right in front of them, but she could not see the Prophet, peace be upon him, at all. She turned to Abu Bakr and said, "Where is your companion? I heard that he has insulted me. If I find him, I will smash his face." But God had concealed his Prophet from her sight. That was the moment when the world witnessed how a woman who once considered herself among the most powerful figures of the Quraysh had become so helpless in the sight of God that even her eyes were no longer under her control. But her downfall was not yet complete. The true chapter of disgrace was only just beginning, and she was about to face what she could never have imagined. As time passed, Islam moved beyond the narrow streets of Makkah and established itself firmly as a powerful state in Medina. The message of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, continued to spread, and those who were once the center of Quraysh's pride were now becoming helpless and insignificant. Enemies like Abu Lahab had already been humiliated, and now it was Jameel's turn. The woman who once laid thorns in the path of the Prophet, peace be upon him, was now about to walk the most painful path of her own life. Alone, helpless, and disgraced, Jameel developed a severe skin disease that caused her body to begin decaying. Foul-smelling wounds broke out on her skin. Her flesh started to rot, and blood would ooze from the sores. Her entire house was filled with the stench of her illness. Servants who once obeyed her every command now hesitated to even come near. Her sons, whom she had raised herself, began to distance themselves from her. The woman who was once considered the most powerful among the women of Quraysh now lay on her bed, moaning in pain, with no one to even look at her. She could no longer speak, nor call for anyone, nor change her miserable condition. Days passed, the disease worsened, and eventually she died, in silence, in agony, and in utter humiliation. Her body remained in the room for several days because her own family was unwilling to touch her. The stench had spread into the street. People walked past her house covering their faces, and children would say, "This is the woman who used to curse Muhammad, peace be upon him." Eventually, a few laborers were paid to come. Using sticks, they dragged her corpse away, without washing, without a burial shroud, without a funeral prayer, and buried her in a shallow pit in a desolate corner of Makkah. It was as if even the earth hesitated to accept her. This was the fate of the woman who dared to oppose the Prophet of the Lord. Her name is mentioned in the Quran, but not as an honor, rather as a warning. Until the end of time, whenever the verse referring to the carrier of firewood is recited, the image of a disgraced woman will come to mind, one who, blinded by her pride in power, forgot the wrath of God. If you want more true, soul-shaking, and faith-strengthening stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to share this video with others.